afternoon and good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. I hope you had an excellent day today at Sankalp Global Summit 2021. My name is Karnika Yadav, and I'm joining in today from Nairobi, Kenya. We are more than halfway through Sankalp, and so far we have curated 27 sessions, had the honor to host 2 Nobel laureates, and so far reached over 20,000 people across the world. But we are not done yet. There are still more workshops, speaker lounges, enterprise showcases, and so much more this evening and tomorrow. As one of the IntelliCap's women leader, I'm delighted that through the Sankalp Forum, we are keeping women's empowerment and gender equity at the center of the Sankalp. Last year, we were one of the first global conveners to host a conversation about the care economy. It was incredibly timely given the onset of the ongoing pandemic. All of us have spent more time at home during the last 18 months, and many of us have contributed at home to the management of the household. This is an essential launching point for everyone to understand the volume of unpaid work that goes on every day across the world. Women are highly burdened by unpaid care and domestic work, resulting in time poverty, drudgery, and ineffective participation in the labor market. There is a clear opportunity to support entrepreneurs working to organize in an unorganized sector in childcare, elderly care, and household management. Estimates show that increasing investment in the care economy can create 475 million jobs by 2030 and help meet SDG targets related to health, education, and decent job creation. The market for products and services that help consumers care for the people in their lives is huge. So it's not just a good thing to do for gender equity, but it is a good business opportunity. This evening conversation will focus on just this, care economy. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce today's moderator, Erin Tensei, who is the Director of Sustainable Inclusive Economies Program with IDRC. She brings over 20 years in experience in international development and humanitarian sectors with Canadian and international non-governmental organizations, United Nations agencies, and bilateral development programs. Welcome, Erin. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Karnika. And hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Bonjour, namaste to all of you all over the world. It's absolutely my pleasure to be here and to listen and enter into this conversation with some fantastic panelists. Just to give you a bit of a background and situate you, I'll tell you a little bit about IDRC, the International Development Research Centre. So we're part of Canada's foreign affairs and development efforts. We fund and support high quality research in developing countries. We share knowledge with researchers and policymakers to inform local and action, and we mobilize alliances to drive global change. Gender equality and inclusion are central to IDRC's mandate, and the research we support is generating research and evidence on what works to foster the structural reforms needed to realize equal opportunities and rights, and also access to services. So in particular, we support research that addresses the many systemic barriers that prevent marginalized women and girls in developing countries from advancing economically. The COVID pandemic, as Karnika has just mentioned, has amplified the cost and impact of inequalities on women and girls, increasing the urgency and relevance of putting gender equality at the core of responses and recovery efforts. So in particular, the COVID-19 pandemic revealed the existence of a care crisis. And it's shown how important care work actually is to the functioning of society. And it also showed the lack of investment in the care sector, such as in the health sector and childcare, and the lack of recognition given to paid and unpaid work that falls disproportionately on the shoulders of women. So today we're going to be tackling and talking about the care economy. And when I say care economy, this can include the direct care of children, of the elderly, of people with illnesses or disabilities, but it also includes activities like cooking, cleaning, laundry, fetching water, fetching fuel, and other household maintenance tasks. Care work can be paid, but it can also be unpaid. So our programming at IDRC has contributed to understanding how women's care responsibilities and the drudgery of this work hamper their economic empowerment. So through a new phase of our Growth and Economic Opportunities for Women initiative, GROW, IDRC is now exploring business and public service models to provide affordable childcare for marginalized women, as well as technologies that save women time while reducing energy consumption. The scale of the challenges that the COVID pandemic have exacerbated requires both public and private sector action to drive an inclusive recovery. And today, we're going to learn about how private sector initiatives that aim to generate solutions to humanity's most pressing challenges using market-based approaches can help shape a more equal society. Social innovators and the Business for Good movement are really stepping in to provide urgent solutions to address the negative health, social and economic impacts of COVID, and in particular, solutions to the care crisis. And more investment capital is flowing in that direction to grow and scale up a supportive care ecosystem and boost women's economic potential. So as we'll learn in this panel, innovative market-based solutions to recognize, to reward, to reduce, and to redistribute care and care activities are emerging, including business models to provide affordable, high-quality childcare to underserved communities and in the workplace, or to support care entrepreneurs in running and scaling their business. Social finance has a critical role to play in transforming and scaling the care economy. So impact investors have started to support this transformation by providing the necessary capital for innovative impact enterprises to help reward, reduce, and redistribute care responsibilities between the state, households, the market, and communities. And given that most of these enterprises are in the care economy, are led by women, investors who finance them are also providing entrepreneurial opportunities for women. But while these are promising developments, we need to find out how we can take these innovations to scale and how we can make sure that more finance flows into a care-focused economy and creates a strong, supportive infrastructure for an inclusive and gender-equal society. So with our panelists, whom you'll meet in a minute, we will explore the state of the private sector in the care economy, opportunities for social finance to support care enterprises and entrepreneurs, and the support structures needed to enable these investments. And we'll also look at the way forward for collaboration to grow this care economy. So for this discussion today, I am joined by Katja Freywall. She's the Regional Program Manager of the We Empower Asia program with UN Women's Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. Rudaba Zehra Nasser, she's the Global Lead, Employment and Care, and Global Lead of Economic Inclusion in the International Finance Corporation's Gender and Economic Inclusion Group. We also have Andya Chakava. She's the Investment Director with the Grâce Saint-Michel Trust and the founding chairperson of New Faces, New Voices, Women in Finance Network's Kenya chapter. And then we also have Abha Torat Shah. She's the Executive Director of Social Finance with the British Asian Trust. So I'm going to invite each panelist to share some brief remarks about their work and how it's linked to the care economy. It'll be sort of a round of questions. And then at the end, we'll have a chance to have some questions from you, the audience. So I think you can probably type those in the chat, and they'll be fed through. So in the first question, I'm going to direct it to Katja. So Katja, could you please tell us more about the Empower Asia and the Care Accelerator that you supported during the pandemic, including how the program can be and what it hopes to achieve for care and care workers?
Thank you very much, Erin, and thank you for the organizers to have us all together on such an important and I have to say very heartfelt topic to myself. So I'm really passionate about it. And I can talk a little bit about We Empower Asia, which originally didn't have a lot to do with or directly with unpaid care work or the care economy. It was originally a program which started pre-COVID and was actually looking at three elements, and particularly looking at increased women's participation in business. That was the overall objective and still is. And was actually bringing three elements together. On the one side, looking on how to create more gender responsive businesses. So that we did in a way, and we're still doing this, by implementing and working strongly with corporates, medium, large size multinational companies to implement what we call the women's empowerment principles. And I'll talk about them a little bit later. So that's one element, working with corporates. The other element was creating a gender responsive ecosystem for entrepreneurship in a wider sense, not defined on care or anything. And the third element was really creating that enabling environment. And I think that's UN Women's role also, is to really convene governments, policymakers, regulators. And by bringing all of these three elements together, the idea was, and still is, to really drive that participation of women in the corporate sector and in business. Now, in the midst of implementing, the pandemic hit, and we were really grateful actually to our donor, the European Union, who really thought with us, how could we use our program now to really use the same framework, but bring this to one of the most impacts of COVID, the care burden, which I think everyone has felt during that time and still feeling in some of the countries. So we've thought about how could we really translate this into the care economy. And that has led us to really leverage, when I said in the beginning, the big network of corporates that we have created that have signed up to that commitment on gender equality and the women's empowerment principles. And really, how could we link this actually with the entrepreneurships ecosystems that we had built already? So that led us to the idea to actually create what we call the Care Accelerator, or UN Women's Care Entrepreneurship Accelerator, which actually really brings together investors. So Seedstars is one of our investors there that we are working with. Think tanks like Pop Inc. And I think the ones that have joined the Sankalp on the first day have probably heard from them as well. And bringing together actually UN Women, and most of all, really seeking for care entrepreneurs. So really enterprises that either provide more affordable, more accessible childcare. And I can share a little bit more how that journey actually went. That's still ongoing and it's really enlightening. But what we basically have done is really taking that network, or that framework, sorry, and really put this into the care economy. Because as UN Women, very strongly, obviously, we believe in the provision of public care provision. I think that's a non-negotiable, and that's needed, and we need investments into this. But we also see that opportunity that can entrepreneurship bring, and particularly women's entrepreneurship. And I think that's what we're seeing strongly. While a lot of women lose their jobs, the care sector and care entrepreneurship is an opportunity to not only create more women-owned businesses, but also create decent work opportunities for women. I'll pause it here. And I'm sure my other panelists or fellow panelists have things to share on this, and we'll have time to get into depth on the Accelerator a little bit later.
Super, thank you so much. I'm going to now turn to Rudaba. Rudaba, can you tell us more about the IFC's approach to the care sector, your employee-sponsored childcare, and what led the IFC to work in this space through this or other initiatives?
Great, thank you, Erin, and thanks to Sankalp and IntelliCap for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. In 2014, when I joined IFC, my work focused exclusively on working with private sector companies to advance women's access to more and better jobs, which is also one of the main pillars of our World Bank Group gender strategy. And one of the main themes that kept coming up through my work with the private sector, and that companies also kept raising, was childcare. The companies noticed that lack of access to good quality, affordable childcare was one of the main reasons keeping women out of the workforce. So they wanted to learn more. And that's when IFCs set out on this journey to better understand why childcare matters to companies so much and their employees as well, and then what can they actually do about it. So since 2017, IFC has published a series of global and regional reports making clear the business case for employer-supported childcare. What can employers do? And outlining some good practices for employers and their employees, as well as we've made efforts to understand the global landscape for childcare demand, for supply, and policy frameworks in several countries, including in India, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Cambodia, Vietnam, Fiji, Myanmar, and several countries. And then the next step for us was to better understand, so this was the why. The next step was for us to understand the how. And that's also something that the private sector kept raising with us. Okay, we understand the business case, we understand the landscape. Now, what do we actually do about it? And that's when we used IFC's convening power to get about 30 leading childcare experts and public and private sector partners, some of whom are here today with us, including UN Women and IDRC, to discuss solutions and develop a first of its kind global guide for employers on the topic of childcare. And then when COVID-19 hit last year, as we all know, the topic of childcare rose in prominence. The childcare crisis was exacerbated exponentially. And we mobilized quickly and became the first DFI to publish guidance exclusively for the private sector on what they can do during COVID-19 to support childcare, to support family-friendly workplace solutions, even beyond childcare. And for example, breastfeeding support, paid leave, and flexible work arrangements as well. And since then, since about 2017, we have been supporting companies, advising companies, helping them assess the demand for childcare, implement solutions, come together as part of peer learning collaborations to learn from each other as part of our global advisory program. And then through our research, through our work with companies, we've worked with about 1,000 companies across more than 20 emerging economies. So our work is focused particularly on developing countries and emerging economies. And we also work very closely with the World Bank, our sister organization. We work closely with governments and related entities. And very interesting example is that we've done research across 189 economies to understand childcare policies, and we've published policy briefs. And the work that we did in India and the report that we published here, and our collaboration with the government and collaboration with the private sector through a series of roundtables in 3 cities across India, had a significant role to play in the government taking concrete policy actions and issuing an advisory to all states in India to publish childcare guidelines. And to conclude, just next year, IFC is planning to expand our work on care to include childcare, yes, but also elderly care and mental health and well-being, which we think has been at the center of this global pandemic. And this is all in response to the work that we've seen our clients are interested in, also governments and other organizations. And we hope to partner with a lot of these organizations as we move forward.
Super, wow, that's you've been busy. And I'm sure that the many documents that you referred to will be posted in the chat, or at least a link to a place that people can access those, because that some of them sound absolutely crucial and fascinating for understanding what we're dealing with, and that tools have started to really be created to address so many of the challenges. So now I'm going to turn to Andya and look at it from the sort of impact investing perspective. So Andya, I'd like to hear more about the work you're doing on gender lens investing and how it connects with the care economy from an investor's perspective. So what could investment in care mean for women entrepreneurs and women's economic advancement?
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. So at the Gresham Michelle Trust, we are primarily driving gender lens investing, and it's a growing field of investment that is really starting to disrupt the status quo because it's presenting opportunities that really challenge the assumption that investment choices must be driven exclusively by profits. So the way we use investments and how we're influencing the impact investment community is really how we're going to address structural inequalities, how we're going to promote environmental health, and how we're going to improve people's lives in a holistic manner. Now, Karnika touched on it in the beginning, but when you look at just in terms of the unpaid care work, where you have women primarily performing 76% of total hours of unpaid work, and doing this 3 times more than men, and having no country on earth where men do more of this work than women. We also have the trend, because we work with about 17 networks across Africa of women and networks that we have nurtured across various sectors, as well as some of our programmatic activity, which has got to do with women's leadership and enterprise development. We're also seeing an increasing trend of single parents leading households worldwide. So when we are here supporting women in business, and we are encouraging investors as well as ourselves within our investment strategy, really looking at women as founder 50+1, we have to look at the holistic needs that create an enabling environment for that entrepreneur to succeed. So whereas we recognize that and support female innovators that we see as a catalyst to really serving, really designing solutions to the underserved need of the female segment, it also allows us to really address what are some of the barriers that women are facing, so that as investors, we can unpack them and also assess them fairly when it comes to the due diligence and portfolio management stage. And I think one of the key things that we noticed that shaped up when we did our study about the growth barriers affecting women is that a lot of women businesses were really in early growth stages. And the businesses were operating, but they were small. A lot of them continued to be home-based, and they were home-based even prior to COVID. And this was really as a result of needing to work close to their caregiving role, and also not having that ability to risk and take additional capital. So they were bootstrapping, and they continued to bootstrap because a lot of them are the breadwinners or are uncertain about how their businesses will survive if they are not if they're unable to pay back the loan, because they also have that big aspect of looking after the family. So our role was really to make investors understand some of these barriers that that women are facing, and get investors to know that women are more comfortable really addressing in networks and groups and peers where they can actually share freely, and they can actually give each other strategies. And we saw that especially during the COVID period, a lot of women were able to give each other sort of emotional support in terms of how they would balance all these increasing responsibilities. Another area that when we look at and we see how the unpaired case sector comes through is really the relationship when it comes to other parts that creates a lot of absenteeism or pauses in a woman's entrepreneurial journey. And what we've done is really try to support women through technical assistance, whether it's the access to the networks, whether it is the access to finance, in terms of facilitating groupings that people can talk. So we've seen a lot of absenteeism due to not only taking care of the children, but when children are sick, the women themselves also are unavailable. We're also seeing the increased need of women generally taking care of older parents where we are, as well as bearing the brunt of gender-based violence, which was something that came about that was excavated during COVID, and it's not something that people like to talk about. So what we've been talking about is really having more patient capital, and capital that is really more targeted to the type of business that the women are running. These sectors might not necessarily be the IT sectors, which is technology or energy, but more retail-based, trade-based sectors, and really getting investors to appreciate the context and the circumstances within which we're talking about. I'm coming from a background where I'm talking mainly about what is happening in an Africa context. We're also able to really play with the different types of capital that can be suited to these women businesses. So really noting that at a time of desperation, that maybe the traditional debt structures may not necessarily work, and equity, especially when we just talked about the smaller deal sizes, may not seem very attractive. So really finding out how we can do interested blended initiatives. Maybe it could be some form of reimbursable sort of grants where you can do some level of interest-free loans with very sort of long grace periods, and finding alternative funders that are willing to actually pilot and basically target funding so that we can build evidence around it. So I think the messaging is not that the businesses don't exist, plenty of them are there. It's not that the businesses are not viable, they're very viable and are operating in sectors where we see are actually bringing about and solving very unique problems. Some of these problems we're not even aware they exist, and until a female innovator brings it to the fore. But recognizing that the traditional types of capital that we may have in the market may not necessarily be suited to address this. Neither will the investor sort of mentality be experienced enough to sort of address issues that cause pauses in a woman's career trajectory that have got to do with absenteeism, that is related to various aspects that are dealing with unpaid care. How my time? I think
you're over time. It's all right. That was a lot of information, and absolutely fascinating. Just even that small statistic at the beginning where you said that nowhere in the world do you find a country where men do more care work than women. That just says it all. But fantastic. So now just I'm going to move over to Abba and ask her to tell us, Abba, if you could please, a little bit more about the British Asian Trust's social finance work and the experience you've had with focusing on outcomes. So in your experience, how can social finance be a tool for change?
Thank you, Erin, and what a hard act to follow that. You had policy from Radava, you had Raja with the sort of really big focused intervention, and then the investment after that. I'm from the British Asian Trust, and I represent the South Asian diaspora community in the UK who wants to see positive social change in the areas in South Asia. And a fact that I was sort of ruminating about is that the care economy in this country, the care industry, is owned, the private sector is owned by many British Asian businesses. They own care homes, they run care homes, and there is the sort of culture where they have been part of that movement of the care sector in the United Kingdom. So really critical part of our diaspora that funds us to do our work actually runs businesses in this sector, and they get the challenges that the care sector faces, whether it's with aging or with disability, and we really learn and hear from their mental health. So that's one fact. And of course, I'm a mother myself, so as a carer, you yourself get that sense of how do you balance these various things, and the pandemic brought it up. And the one thing I think is, from a personal perspective, I'd reflect on, and we often bring the personal into the professional, is that this is a very informal sector we're talking about. Much of care work, domestic work is informal. And as we think of solutions, social finance solutions, we have to think about the informality of many of the people in this space. So a second sort of point on that, our co-constituency informing us in terms of their business needs, big business needs, telling us how they should be thinking about it with government. And then, of course, as a parent myself, bringing that sense of how do you make payments work? How do you make policies work? And inherently, it's a business that's unregulated here as well as in India, which is my country of residence, country of birth. So what's innovative finance? We think of innovative finance as a broad spectrum. It could include investment, it could have traditional grant making, but it starts with the question of what's the outcome you want to achieve. And within the care economy, if you're defining outcome as better, let's say better policies for women in the workplace, you would then align financial incentives around those outcomes. So our starting point for any problem, whether it's in the care economy or in education or in skills, where we do a lot of work, is what is the outcome? Is that outcome aligned for the right incentives correctly? And if it is not aligned, how can financial incentives change the way? Erin, most solutions normally come from the nonprofits or directly from donors. No one ever says to finance, oh, you're actually funding activity and therefore disincentivizing the right things. So the questions we always ask are to finance to say, are you working on the right incentives, and are structures there to enable all kinds of new finance coming in? So bringing in new finance and aligning incentives is what we focus on at the British Asian Trust, mostly in education and in now a little bit in healthcare, a lot of work in skilling, gender, of course, running as a theme across, but we would take the same principles into the care economy as well. Thank you.
Super, thank you. That's yeah, very, very interesting. And also, you know, to bring in the personal perspective, because ultimately we can all understand what some of these massive challenges are just in our own lives of trying to balance, you know, so many of the demands on our time and our work, etc. So I'm going to move to sort of round two of the questions, where we're going to talk about how we go from promising innovations and programs to actually transforming the care economy. I'm going to start with Rudaba and ask you the following. So in your work with the employers implementing childcare programs, what was driving them to start these programs, and what were their support needs and challenges? Do they have a role to play in encouraging the creation and growth of care enterprises?
Thank you for that question, Erin. And yes, in short, 100% they do. In addition to the primary role that governments must play in this regard, the private sector can also support and enhance and help bridge the gap between care demand and supply in many ways. But to your first point, what drives the private sector? And that's something that we've been studying for the last so many years, is to understand the business drivers. What are the business benefits or the business case points that really encourage and incentivize the private sector to do this? And there are several. Companies come to us and they say, we want to increase the number of women in our workforce, or we see a high absenteeism rate or a high turnover rate among working parents. What do we do? Or they come to us and say, we are facing tight labor market conditions characterized by skill shortages and there's high competition for talent. How do we attract and retain and promote the best talent, right? And then, very interestingly, this is something that our work with the World Bank showed, where we looked at childcare policies across 189 economies, that there are about 30 countries around the world where employer-supported childcare is legally mandated, including in India, including in Bangladesh. So there's a compliance business driver as well, where companies have to do this if they reach or employ a certain number of employees. In India, it's number of employees. In Bangladesh, it's number of female employees. And India made that transition to shift from the number of female employees to make it gender neutral. So there are several of these policies in different parts of the world. So there's a legal requirement. And then when we did research to understand what drives or what's preventing companies from complying with this law, in India, for example, we found that we surveyed about 300 companies, and we found that financing was a huge one. Companies not having, especially smaller companies, don't have the funds to do this. They don't understand the quality and implementation guidelines. What should quality look like? What are the health and safety standards? Because there's no standardized guidance out there for companies to follow. In fact, a company in Pakistan very innocently asked me, we make socks. How do we support childcare? So those are very valid concerns. And I think guidelines can really help. That's something that government can do. And government can also look into incentivizing tax and non-tax benefits for the private sector to do this kind of work. And then we are doing our part to support the companies in terms of through our guides, through the tools that we have, through our advice. But there's a lot more work that can be done. And companies are a huge, you can say, they carry a lot of demand, or they can be a source of demand for a lot of these businesses. We've seen companies in Bangladesh partnering with local childcare providers to run their corporate childcare centers, because they should outsource it to the experts, and they should focus on making socks. So there's a big symbiotic relationship that can happen here. And there's also, I think, more and more understanding among the private sector that a childcare center is not the only solution. There are so many different ways in which different companies in different sectors can support the care needs of their employees. They can tie up with a local childcare provider. They can partner with the government. We've seen public-private partnerships popping up in Turkey. In the IT sector in India, the companies have gotten together and they invest in one childcare center. So that kind of helps them divide resources and the time and energy put into running childcare. And then, of course, the complementary family-friendly policies that I mentioned: breastfeeding, support, paid leave, flexible work arrangements, all go together to really help companies. And now more and more employees, and now more and more companies are also looking into mental health support and elderly care, because of the women who are in the sandwich generation taking care of kids as well as elderly parents or family members. So there are a lot of solutions that that employers can actually implement, and they need support. So there's a great role for childcare and care businesses to work with the companies to do this.
Super. And one would hope that with that, all of that kind of investment in the more formal part of the sector, that would somehow trickle down to the informal sector, which is also huge and doesn't have frameworks to put any of these safeguards in place at this moment in time. All right, so I'm going to move over to Andya. And ask you, so from your perspective at the trust, what needs to be done to attract more capital towards the care sector, and how can an ecosystem intermediaries and researchers, policymakers, and others support this?
Yeah, I think capital is driven by numbers and the scale of the problem. I'm always joking that if it's too big to fail, then many people want to be involved in it. And I'm taken in by the numbers that ILO published, where they said, in terms of children and older persons, the number of people that need care is going to be around 2.3 billion. So we cannot ignore investment in the care economy. And we have to look at the impact that this is going to have on both sides. So whether we're looking at Africa as a continent that has a demographic dividend with a lot of young people, or we look at the Europe and North with a lot of aging people, there's one common factor there, that women are the ones that are going to be assumed to give that care. And this is, when I say women, I just don't mean mothers. I mean, as long as you are a female in a household, that responsibility is assumed. It is assumed to be yours, even over siblings, when they're both boys and girls. So we're talking about a real threat to productivity. And right now, we actually have a system where in the health sector overall, we have about 70% of women making up the health sector, specifically in the nursing care. And we have women also making up over 90% in domestic work, what we call informal, what we call as the invisible economy. So I think there is a lot of motivation to do something around it. And one of the key things is just the evidence gathering. And this is where we see, because a lot of the unpaid care work is not necessarily counted, it's not necessarily valued. And we actually see this sort of play out. We've been having some sort of controversial court rulings where it says where a man could have been working, the woman is a homemaker, but when they split, the judge sort of says everybody goes with what they come with, almost assuming that there was no contribution to that value that was being created. We also find a scenario if a work environment in itself is hostile and does not allow for paid paternity leave. And this is even in some of the most developed countries in the world. Or it does not allow women to actually have a conducive environment when they return. We've had a lot of women in the entrepreneurial side that were actually in very stable corporate jobs, but were treated differently when they came back after they had their children, in terms of their team, in terms of people lower than them being promoted. So there's a whole aspect in terms of what is the culture around paid care. And so to me, the investment community can drive a lot more capital, really recognizing the extent of the program and how the problem and how it affects productivity and wellness. And I think the key thing here is to make it measurable in terms of how do we measure what's happening on the informal side, and is to make it affordable and accessible, but also recognizing that attitudes have to be changed. And one of the ways you can make attitudes change is really by scaling the innovations as they come and supporting them to grow. So really creating a joint motivation between both male and female investors who want to solve this problem. One of the key ways that we've seen that has worked, though it's done at a very higher level, which is on listed companies, where we worked with Equilib, which is a gender equality tool, really to rank listed companies. We did Kenya as the first in Africa. It's a global tool, and we were really ranking companies in terms of their practices. And it really went on gender, a number of gender equality metrics in terms of from leadership representation to policies to a commitment to gender payback and flexible pay. But a lot of it had to do with just what is the operating environment for those companies. And the reason why we chose listed companies, and this study's been replicated in other parts, is that they receive the most visibility, and holding them accountable now has a ripple effect to other private sector. It also has a ripple effect also in countries where the private sector is leading the government, or sometimes it's the other way around. But really having these tools and publishing it transparently, encouraging other parties to come in and assist to pilot or even study the impact of companies that have actually demonstrated this. There are a number of flower farms in Kenya that have created sort of, ecosystems of support, because they're doing flowers, so they need the hospitals there, they need the schools there, they need the community there for the employees to survive. So this is something that we're talking about. It really is about investing in the care economy so that we can have women really spend more time on opportunities that can allow them to contribute fairly to the workforce. And we see this as a way of just evenly reducing a gender pay gap, and also reducing some of the tension that comes about with gender-based violence, which also could be as a result of responsibilities around care, as well as creating a more stable financial income for both parties as we're working to sort of build ourselves a better livelihood. So there's the need for evidence, there's the need to support the infrastructure around it, and there's the need to basically use tools and metrics to sort of gather ecosystem players to hold various parties to account, so that everybody can hold themselves to this particular standard of what it means and what an environment is when we actually support enterprises that invest in the care economy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. Yes, let me go to Ava now and ask about what programs or processes or innovative tools need to be established or scaled to ensure that tailored capital is available to the sector, and how can we unlock more capital for care enterprises?
Thank you, Erin. When people ask me, how do you unlock capital? The first thing I say is you need clarity, both on what the intent and purpose of that capital is, and secondly, what the impact you're going to have. Now, let me use two sectors where I know really well to bring it alive for you. And I'm listening to this care economy conversation carefully to figure out where those could sit within your sector. In education, when we started work on learning outcomes, it was this undefined thing. Children should have learning outcomes was seen as a good thing. How much it cost, or how you managed to do it, and what contributed to a definition of learning outcomes. Is it just education, literacy, and numeracy, or is it social emotional learning? Was unclear in India. Over this period, we've been working on outcome-based financing. Foundation literacy and numeracy has been clearly defined by the government of India, and we have clear targets on what we have to do. Capital today in that sector is able to understand what a learning outcome means. We've learned how to price it through early instruments, because it's not like pricing an input, because you have to fund an outcome, you have to price an outcome very differently. And we are able to bring capital in because we can provide that kind of clarity. Let me then turn to skills. In skills, when we started, we've been designing a Skill India Impact Bond with several partners. Gender sits at the heart of it. We learned from our partners that out of every 100 women who come to skilling training providers in India, I think 1 or 2 make it to a job or stay in a job for 6 months. So one of our sort of starting points with our partners was to say, if we turn the incentives around and incentivize our providers a higher outcome payment for every woman who's put through the system, and an incentive not for training her, but for keeping her in a job for 6 months or 3 months, as we've ended up with, because 6 was unmeasurable in terms of the viability of the data. We then start changing incentives. It's not about changing any one thing, Erin. Inputs could be 100 different inputs might need to change for that one outcome to be influenced. But what you have to sort is the pricing and then have a clear target on it. You can do many things, or you can decide that capital needs to be doing 3 or 4 critical things that colleagues at UN Women or IFC define for the global market space, and then you align a lot of capital around that. Those would be the ways I would go at it. That's sort of a short answer to that one.
Yeah, super. Very, very fascinating, and very, and you've got some, experience in other sectors that can be absolutely applied to this one. Getting clarity on what actually we want to measure and what the outcome, what they want the outcome to be. Okay, so now I'm going to move to Katja. So Katja, I'd like to hear more about the experience of Care Accelerator that you mentioned briefly earlier on. And if you could just tell us a little bit about what the gaps were and what the support needs were that you found for care entrepreneurs and for accelerators, and what's needed to grow and scale their enterprises. So what was the Care Accelerator able to do?
Thank you, Erin. And I was attentively listening to all the other speakers, and I'm going to say one thing. What I'm sharing is not research. It's really something what we have learned on the go while we are doing this. So I really want to take this also with a word of caution, but I think that's the spirit of Sankalp, to also show innovation and share what is ongoing. So basically, when we started the Care Accelerator, we had the idea in mind. Acceleration programs are done for any other kind of sector, for climate, etc. Why is that not possible for the care sector? And we haven't heard of anything beforehand. So naively, as we were, we said, let's just do it, let's try it, and let's bring organizations together that are action-oriented. So people like Bob Ainge, like very think tanks that are a bit more kind of fast and really let's just try it and get our hands dirty. So the first learning we had, by just a call for proposal, it was tremendously difficult to find care enterprises. And it started by, what is a care enterprise? And we have heard a lot of definitions today, and we've put this into the definitions, and we got tremendously a lot of healthcare applications. So care was very strongly kind of always linked to healthcare, but it was very difficult to find childcare, elderly care, thinking about improvement of care services, enterprises that are doing this. So we had to do really kind of deep research and outreach, which normally in other acceleration programs, I think is less the case. What we then found was really interestingly a wide variety of business models, and we are for the moment doing a landscaping on that, which we will share very soon. And really kind of reached from matching platforms of caregivers, which we all know, to deeper programs that have matchmaking platforms, but also provide trainings to their caregivers. And we will be hearing from some of one entrepreneur later on that is doing this. And then we really had models that are actually focusing on improvement of care services, which I found very interesting. And looked already in the Q&A, so I'll help you, Erin, as a moderator a little bit. I think Mia had a question on asking how could we more invest into improving the quality of care services than investing necessarily in businesses. But one of the Indian enterprises in our cohort is actually exactly doing this, training caregivers that can be public caregivers after as well. Indeed, they are. So he's also working with the government. So it's not only business to business or business to consumer, but also business to government solutions. So I think that's another learning to kind of see care enterprises much more in sort of that triangle as we see it. And then what we have done, we had 2 tracks and we still have 2 tracks that we are going. One is really on business growth, like very classical acceleration program. And the other one is looking at inclusion. How inclusive are the business models? As young women, we want to make sure that they are inclusive. So we had these 2 tracks. On the business side, very top line learnings, very early stage. Many of the enterprises, very early stage. Few had already investors, but really very few. And as normal enterprises, very difficult for them to really get to scale. So it's still kind of in that stage, the enterprises at least that we worked with. The other thing was our enterprises, and that was a little bit biased by, we had a kind of Asia in a wider geographical scope, and it was English speaking. So we didn't really get into the micro entrepreneurs, etc. So I think we only kind of having what we call that missing or that middle kind of segment of the pyramid. So I think there is a need for more acceleration programs that are upward and downward reaching. So that's another learning. And then in our inclusion kind of track, that is the most interesting one, honestly, because it doesn't mean having a care enterprises, you're an inclusive enterprise per definition. So they are facing a lot of challenges themselves and a lot of things that we went with them through training. What does it mean to be a gender responsive business? And I think a lot of eye-opening and learning from their side as well in a really good way. But we also saw a lot of risks actually in some of the models if they are not well regulated. And we saw that many of the entrepreneurs are actually operating in a gray space because some of them are classified as technology companies, which is good because they can operate right now. Otherwise, they couldn't be operating what they are doing. So there's a lot of gray area which requires regulations, and we need to understand better. I'll keep it there. Otherwise, I go too deep. And the last kind of element, maybe from a more investor's perspective or investments perspective. Interestingly, we see that bias is playing in a double way in these care enterprises. On the one hand, there are a lot of women that are owning these enterprises, and they face gender bias in fundraising, as we know. But on the other side, the men that are owning the care businesses are doing. Why are you as a man running a care business? So there is also that kind of double bias, which I find quite interesting. And I think just a last comment from my side, what I do feel as to your point, Abba, before, I don't think we only get private investments that will really help there. I think if we don't have bigger public investment, we won't get a lot of private investors. So that's what we hear from the investor that are part of the acceleration program, that the sector is too risky and needs to be de-risked by bigger investments. So I think that's kind of the top line learning so far, more to come. I'll stop it here. I hope that gives a little bit of insights on.
Yeah, that's really good, really fascinating and really interesting learnings that you've had just so far. Very good. I'm just going to take a couple of questions from our audience while we have a few minutes, and just building on what you've just talked about, the Care Accelerator and the need for regulation. There's a question to Rudaba about how can we best push towards regulation in countries like Senegal, where we're very far from that. What are the first steps for that kind of lobbying? So how do you get the buy-in from the public sector to change regulations to make this a more interesting a place to invest?
That's a great question. And of course, the answer will vary from country to country and context to context, but I can share a few examples of how we did it. So As you know, IFC works directly with the private sector. It's the largest global development institution focused exclusively on the private sector. So our first order of business or intervention is through the private sector. And in some of these countries, we were able to outline, okay, which countries have a legal requirement for employers to provide or support childcare, where that is a baseline. And then we wanted to understand what's preventing employers from complying with that law and supporting childcare. So we were able to do surveys, we were able to do focus group discussions with interviews with companies, with employees, with working mothers, fathers. We were able to talk to policymakers, we were able to talk to care providers to really understand what is driving care demand, what is driving care supply or lack of it, and what does the policy environment look like. So I think that landscape analysis, that research to better understand what is the situation on the ground and talking to multiple stakeholders in the country really helped. And getting the private sector to be that voice, to be the advocate, to then what we did, for example, in India, we brought the public and the private sector together through a series of roundtables. And those roundtables were some of the first moments that the private sector and the government actually had a conversation that, yes, this part of the law is not working for us, or maybe this is what we need. This is how we could do it. This is how we could partner. So I think having that dialogue between the public and the private sector, using the private sector's clout and their voice in shedding some light on these issues is important. And then really having a set of recommendations going in for the private sector. What can the employers do? What can the governments do? What can donors, investors do? What can care providers do? So if you see our reports, you will see that there are recommendations and there are ideas for action for each stakeholder group. And then just, I think, building from that and being persistent. It takes time. It takes a lot of time and effort and coalition building, but it's really an ecosystem approach. And I really think that supporting one part of the ecosystem does not, make it impossible to support another part of the ecosystem. Care workers need support. Governments require assistance. Companies, care employees. So I think if we take an ecosystem approach where we support all these factions and all these components of the machine, so to say, then only we can move forward. And I think we need incentives and we need support in all these different areas moving forward. It takes a village, really, to raise a child. And as my colleague in Kidogo said, it will take a village to address the global care crisis.
For sure. Yeah, and so I just lost my train of thought. I think the fact that that there's that we have to kind of keep repeating the message that it's good for everyone, that having these kind of provisions, changing these regulations, etc., is actually good for all, and that hopefully this would be the ideal situation as all economies are trying to build back from the COVID horrible devastation to the economies, that hopefully there is that window to build back, better, more equal, more inclusive. But there's so much pressure on economies just to get going. So, now's the time to lobby, I guess. And here we are. There are many more questions, but I think we might have to just come back to them in a few minutes, because I want to, I'd like to invite Nadira Yusuf to come and share the perspective of a care entrepreneur on the business ecosystem and role of social finance, creating and growing a care enterprise. Nadira is the founder and CEO of Kido Care, which is Malaysia's first on-demand babysitting platform that connects parents with trained and vetted babysitters based on their preferred time and location. So Nadira, over to you for your presentation. Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. Let me just share my screen. Can I share my screen? Nope, I'm not able to do that. I have a presentation ready. Oh, there you go. Okay. All right. Sorry. Okay. So here we go. I am Nadira Yusuf. I am the CEO and founder of Kiddo Care, and we aspire to foster happy families with our next generation childcare platform. And I am also happy to also share with you that Kiddo Care is also a very proud participant of the UN Women Care Accelerator program. So I can't control the slides myself, but okay, all right. So you see, before I started Kiddo Care, I was running an IT company with more than 120 employees. And over the years, I realized that my employees were taking just too many leaves. You name it, unpaid leaves, emergency leaves, annual leaves. And many of them actually led to, the concern of or having to take care of their children. And we're just talking about leaves. We're not even talking about, them coming in late and leaving in early, leaving out early, missing in action. And a lot of times when we drill down, it was always about attending to their children, their family needs, right? And I started talking to my other business friends, and they were all telling the same thing. And businesses seems to lose a lot of money and productivity time because of this issue. Drilling down to the numbers in Malaysia alone, right? So we're a Malaysian startup. We see that only the 39% of women were working in the Malaysian labor force, and out of that, 34.2% would then leave the labor force to take care of their children once they get married and have children. And what's more, I think, disheartening for us, the balance of women in the workforce refuse to take any career advancement because they cannot cope with their care responsibilities. So we thought, hey, we've got to do something about this. And it's usually about childcare. And we started looking into the problem with childcare. So can we go to the next screen, please? Right? So this is the childcare issue in Malaysia, right? We require 39,000 childcare centers. We only have 4,000 to accommodate 5 million children in Malaysia. So we don't have enough. When we don't have enough, parents tend to send their children to unregulated centers, unskilled workers, and we hear all this news about abuse and accidents and childcare death happening in unregulated centers. So we thought we've got to do something about this. We have to come up with a solution that's fast enough, that is best to solve the problem. And how can we do this? To us, we can use technology, but it's not just about technology intervention. It's also about making childcare right. So we came up with Kiddo Care about 3 years ago. Can we go to the next slide, please? So Kiddo Care is a platform that connects parents to train and certified, for now, Malaysian childcare service providers for personalized services. We envision to become the support platform that will then help parents to develop and nurture the children from the age of 0 to 12 years old, right? Can we go to the next slide, please? Right. So putting technology alone, will not solve the problem. We took great pride in making sure that the care providers are carefully trained, vetted. So we provide childcare training. We develop our psychometric assessment. We provide CPR and first aid certification. We do thorough background check, not just for them, but also their spouses, to make sure that they come from a stable family, or at least we can help them. We also put in our technology to ensure ease and personalization for our parents, so they could get in babysitters or childcare providers anytime they require, especially for entrepreneurs like me. The requirement just, comes just at any time. And a lot of personalization that allows for special requirement, language specifications, certain skill sets and stuff like that. We also use technology to then automate certain SOPs to allow our parents to have similar service level experience, no matter who comes in for service. And we also use technology to provide in-service monitoring. So this adds additional peace of mind to our customers, on top of the regular updates and things like that that they will get, right? Next, please. right? So when we first started about 3 years ago, our main product was actually the on-demand nanny. We were in a niche market, but after that, we started expanding to various different markets to make sure that we can provide a very inclusive childcare services for everyone. So it has to be reliable, it could be easy to access, and it's what do you call that? It's inclusive for all. So we have different types of services, which includes travel nannies, we have counselor services, parenting coaches, we have pop-up nanny, which is basically a temporary childcare facilities that we work with companies, even hospitals and hotels to set up what it is temporary mobile childcare facilities. So this allows actually the employees to bring in their children to offices without having to invest in proper big childcare facilities. So this is in a way for us to actually introduce such services in corporate, in companies. At the same time, we wanted also to have our babysitters to grow within our platform and to experience different types of childcare services. This will allow them to then, gain more knowledge, experience, and also build themselves to have higher value in their service. Having different kind of childcare services also is good for us as a business because it diversifies our revenue models. Next, please. So we have seen over the 3 years, we have only been operating in Klang Valley in Kuala Lumpur. So we're not nationwide yet in Malaysia. And we've been operating basically mostly at the time of the COVID lockdown. But despite of that, we've been able to service more than 30,000 customer services with more than 9,000 customers. But what we're really proud of is that we've been able to then develop a kind of profession, I should say, for women to come into the childcare service and earn decent income. See, in Malaysia, childcare workers are among the poor paid workers, right? So we wanted to start changing that. And we've been able to increase their income by allowing them to work flexibly and earning more decently. And it's also about providing a more comfortable and safer environment of work for them as well. So we're looking at certain impact areas using technology to provide easy access to reliable on-demand childcare, creating a circular economic model, and making childcare a preferred profession for women that can actually progress them, by coming in at different levels and getting skills, and then eventually even becoming a childcare entrepreneur. Can we go to the next? Yes. Okay. So during the COVID lockdown, we have seen that KiddoCare has enabled income creation for women. So during the times when childcare centers were closed, we were the go-to for the frontliners. And we all know many of the frontliners were actually women. So, we helped them, we providing them the kind of on-demand or emergency backup care for them in their own houses that gave them a lot of safety and security comfort as well while they were out doing work. But the other thing that we also realized that the service acted as a crucial support system for parents who were also working from home. Parents who are going through divorce, the lockdown has also caused a lot of marital problem, and the carers were trained to also help the children cope with loss in the families where they lost either their mothers or their fathers, and this not only allowed us to support the needs of the children and the families, but it also allowed us to grow our carers from becoming babysitters, providing them with different types of training and skills so they can also progress within the platform as well. So we have seen that we have been able to create that kind of impact, a really circular economy where we train women to participate in childcare and various different care programs to support families and other women who probably need to go out and work or work from home or even to have time for themselves. So next, please. But, saying all that, it's not without challenges. I think Katja probably had said that also. So investment is a huge challenge for businesses like us. As much as we want to scale, use technology to scale fast, we have to make sure that the business is actually built on the right foundation. Running it or doing it right is the utmost priority. So to find investors who are aligned with our vision, now that's pretty tough, especially within our country, I think. So, you know, we're struggling to find investors with the same vision, the same alignment. We are indeed quite fortunate because we do have 2 investors already with us who are aligned with the vision, but expanding because we need to build the technology, and technology is crucial for us to ensure safety, efficiency of the services, to scale faster. And a lot of marketing has to be done. And when we say marketing, it's also a lot of educating both sides to balance the supply and the demand. The parents need to then understand and appreciate new business models as such, and also appreciating the value of the services that the nannies actually do for them. And it's also about educating the supply side, who are the women who needs to come in to be trained. They need to know that training is important. The standards has to be at a certain level. So these are the kind of challenges that we also face. And some of them are being addressed in the Care Accelerator program. We see, you know, the kind of things that is addressed in the program, which also includes you know, regulations or either rather policies pertaining to sexual harassment at work. So these are the kind of things that we actually have to overcome. But over the years, we have been able to put in our SOPs and technologies to minimize risk, and this has allowed us to grow and scale. So next. Yes, we've come to the end. And thank you for allowing us to share our journey and our experience, our learning with everyone today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nadira. That was just absolutely wonderful and so beautifully presented and so clear. Just a real inspiration, I think, for many people listening and watching today, that, you know, you saw a problem in the market and were able to come up with, not without you know, a lot of hard work and probably many learnings along the way, but you've been able to come up with a really viable solution, which you hope to scale. So it's fantastic. And there were questions from in the chat about, you know, to give us some real life examples, etc. So there's just heard one. Of course, it's in Malaysia, and each region, each country is probably very different. I know there've been a couple of questions from the West Africa side talking about how, yes, there are some, you know, there is some private sector childcare, but it's very expensive at this moment. So, I mean, I think Nadira's story is one example, and there are other examples, I think, where there are even like public-private sector combinations, for instance, in Kenya. So, you know, lots to explore, and it's just been absolutely fascinating. But we only have a few minutes left, so you know, as we've just heard, there's opportunity to transform the care economy through impact businesses and investment, with the potential really to create decent jobs and economically empower women. However, more knowledge obviously is always needed on the impact and the scalability of these models. It's just great to see all of you on the panel. I know that in your daily work, you're actually working on this and getting the evidence, trying to scale up, looking to see really where the bottlenecks are. You know, at IDRC, we also continue to build on our track and our commitment to this area, and to transform the care economy, I guess, and mobilize finance for gender equality. And I just wanted to let you know that we've recently collaborated with the Soros Economic Development Fund, the Open Societies Foundation, and we've done together. So we're launching a research program that will generate high quality and actionable evidence on the financial viability and social and environmental benefits of businesses operating in the care economy. So that will just add to the knowledge in this sector, and it will be, you know, knowledge that's essential for impact investors to make evidence-based decisions in investments that are targeted and we know need to have a very clear focus on what they want to achieve, and you know, has the potential for combining both business benefits and development gains. So it's a project that's being led by Core Global, that's K-O-R-E, Core Global, and Telecap and Busara, as well as Volta Capital and Core Woman. And they're gonna map out, profile, and systematically review care economy business models in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and also Southeast Asia. So I guess watch this space. I mean, it's just really just starting now, as sort of almost as we speak. So it'll take a little bit of time for any results to come out. And then our project hub, which will go live next month, will provide more information about the research and opportunities to engage. So check that out. And we'll work together, continue to work together with impact investors, with businesses and researchers to really transform this part of our economy, the care economy. So I'm just, with our 3 minutes left, I'm going to ask that our panelists give me, in less than 1 minute, maybe one key actionable step or area of focus for stakeholders to transform the care economy through social finance and entrepreneurship. So I'm going to ask Katja, then Rudaba, then Andia, and then Aba. So over to you, Katja.
I'm going to make it very brief, but I have an action for multiple stakeholders, and I think just starting to treat the care economy as a real economy and regulate it also as an economy. So to enable space for great entrepreneurs as Nadira, for example, to flourish.
Super, Rudaba?
Companies, employers around the world can use their influence and can advocate for care, for family-friendly policies, can work with the governments, can pour capital into this economy. And it would be great if they do so with quality. So a focus on health, safety, quality standards, and a mechanism to ensure compliance with these standards will greatly benefit all involved in the care economy. It will raise the bar, it will support jobs, it will support better paid jobs in the care economy. And also, it will quality will help parents trust more in the system, in formal care. If they can see quality, they will be more comfortable sending their kids to these solutions. So there's a big role for the private sector companies to play in this.
Thank you. Andia.
Yeah, to me, I'm a big believer of what doesn't get measured, that doesn't get done. And I think we need to measure first the size of the invisible economy. There are a number of areas that are relying on informal workers to look after their children. Those ladies in turn have other people to look after their children. And I think we can use technology. I think, I mean, I'm from Kenya, so there are mobile networks that will probably be easier to facilitate who's a domestic care worker and really try and put some standards and protection around that. So to me, let's get the scale of that, because there's a lot of domestic worker support and a lot of potential for abuse there that doesn't get quantified. And the other balance, which is more to people in the private sector, is let's push paternal leave. Let's also get the men going off when the women have issues. Let's normalize that. That will also help in terms of changing the culture around unpaid care and what investors need to do.
Thank you. And finally, over to you, Abba.
I think I'll echo what Rudaba said. It does take a village. You need the evidence, you need the investment, you need the incubators, and you need the thought leaders and the policymakers. And I think I can see a spirit of all of that around this. So definitely that sort of village approach works. And I think then you need focus if you want to draw big funding in, because that's when then there's that sort of catalytic moment where all those efforts come together, and where there's government funding unlocking or private investment, that will then bring us all together to do the right thing. So definitely on the right path. And I think hopefully we can be partners on that path with you as well.
Fantastic. And look at it, we've made it exactly on time. So thank you all. Thank you to these wonderful women who came and shared with us their deep knowledge and experience and lessons that they've been learning on this really important journey. That's gonna really, I think, over time have a huge impact. Maybe in a few years' time, this will all seem like absolutely normal, and that men take their paternity leave and share in the care burden that women are carrying right now. And hand in hand, public sector, private sector, researchers, of course, can't forget them, and come up with some. Continue to come up with some fascinating and working solutions to this. So thank you all so much, and thanks to IntelliCap for organizing, and back to you, Anita.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Erin, for great moderation. And thank you to all of our panelists, Andia, Abha, Rudaba, Nadira, and Kutch. It was excellent conversation and very, very thought-provoking. Through this very interesting discussion, my take is that there is an urgent need to incorporate 4 R's in the care economy. We need to recognize, we need to reward, we need to reduce, and we need to redistribute the women's care and domestic work to ensure that the burden is reduced on women and they can more actively participate in the productive workforce. We should also better understand care and work in the local cultural constructs, which will allow us to understand the specific priorities and unmet needs of the women. This will help us understand what care work women consider to be burdensome, unrecognized, and unnecessarily time-consuming, versus something which they consider to be very valuable, rewarding, and beneficial, as well as how local norms around care work. This is important for understanding both women's own priorities and aspirations, and how market-based solutions can help solve for context-specific care economy challenges. So again, thanks a lot, everyone, for participating and contributing to this session. And we hope to keep taking this conversation forward and keep engaging with all of you in the coming future. Now, I would like to introduce the next segment of Sankalp Global Awards 2021. One of the best parts of working at IntelliCap is the opportunity to engage directly with entrepreneurs and helping them scale their businesses. Entrepreneurship is at the core of Sankalp, and this is why we host Sankalp Awards year after year. So it is with immense pleasure that I welcome my colleague George Morake, who will announce the winner in the financial inclusion category for Sankalp Global Awards 2021. Welcome, George.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is George Morage from Nairobi, Kenya. I will be your host for the Sankalp Global Awards 2021, where we will continue to celebrate entrepreneurs and their role in impacting millions across the world. We will be honoring the 5 most promising social enterprises across sectors. On behalf of the Avishka Group, IntelliCap, and Sankalp, I extend a very warm welcome to you all to the 13th edition of the Sankalp Global Awards 2021. The Sankalp Awards are one of the Global South's most prestigious social enterprise awards. Over the years, Sankalp has recognized more than 2,400 social enterprises and channeled more than $270 million to high-impact businesses. The awards are designed to support young companies and recognize their impact, which is successfully steering change. This year, we had an overwhelming number of applications, with over 250 applications from 52 countries globally. Each enterprise went through 3 rounds of assessment, and finally, 10 of the best enterprises pitched to our esteemed grand jury from Asia, America, and Africa. I'd like to introduce today's sector theme of financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is the opportunity for individuals and businesses to access financial services such as transactions, payments, savings, credit, and insurance that are delivered in a responsible and sustainable way. Great strides have been made towards financial inclusion, and 3.8 billion adults worldwide have had bank accounts or mobile money wallets since 2018. This represents nearly 70% of all adults, compared to 51% in 2011. Since 2010, more than 55 countries have made commitments to financial inclusion, and more than 60 have either launched or are developing a national strategy. When countries take an integrated approach to financial access, they increase the pace and impact of reforms by bringing together financial regulators, telecommunications firms, banking institutions, and other stakeholders. Despite the progress made, close to 1/3 of adults, 1.7 billion people, are still unbanked globally. Of those unbanked, about half of them include women, poor households in rural areas, or those who are out of the workforce. The gender gap in account ownership remains stuck at 9% in developing countries, hindering women from being able to effectively control their financial lives. However, countries with a higher density of mobile money users demonstrate better gender equality. Financial inclusion is a key enabler to reduce extreme poverty and boost shared prosperity to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We at Sankalp see that access to mobile money is the next wave of financial inclusion, and we are delighted to be celebrating several of these entrepreneurs today. Our first nominee is Varl from India. Our second nominee is Smart Teller from Nigeria. And the winner for the Sankalp Global Awards 2021 for Financial Inclusion is Smart Teller from Nigeria. We will now have a word from the winner.
Hi, my name is Oluwale, and I am the founder of Smart Teller. Thank you so much to the Sankalp Global Awards team, the grand jury, for selecting Smart Teller as the winner of the Sankalp Global Award 2021 among the 257 enterprise applicants. This is really amazing to us. This is truly an honor to us as well. I would like to thank the Smart Teller team, the Smart Teller customers, and the amazing Smart Teller team for coming together to put this impact project alive. Please visit our virtual booth to connect with us. I hope to meet with you. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into the Sankalp Global Awards 2021. Please join me in congratulating the winner and all of the Sankalp Award finalists. You can visit the enterprises in the virtual exhibition space to learn more about them. If you are interested in investing in any of these amazing companies, please feel free to reach out to me via the virtual platform. I hope you enjoy the remainder of the summit.
Thank you, George, and many, many congratulations once again to the Smart Teller team. We wish you all the best as you grow your business and you achieve great, great heights as you keep exploring and keep expanding your business in the different parts of the world. And finally, remember to log into our networking platform, Brella, to connect with these incredible entrepreneurs and all of us Sankalp Award finalists. We are not done yet for today. Immediately following this, we have our annual Women at Sankalp event. Wow, all the women in the session and all the other participants, I hope you are joining this amazing session that we are going to have in just a short while. Starting now, we also have 2 sessions that focus on creative industries, writing and poetry. So I hope you bring your creative juices with you. In about an hour, we are also having a second entrepreneur slumber party. You won't want to miss 7 incredible entrepreneurs who are changing the world sustainably and profitably. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Sankalp and have a wonderful day. I will now welcome Lotte Mary of BOP Inc. to share a message and close this segment. Welcome, Lotte Mary.
Hi everyone, welcome to Sankalp. So I'm Lotte Marie Brouwer and I'm the Women's Entrepreneurship Lead at BOP Inc. At BOP Inc., our mission is to bring quality products and services to low-income customers in Africa and Asia. And we do this through the power of entrepreneurship. So right now I want to talk to you about financial inclusion as one of those services that we offer. So you might already know that providing access to financial services is still a huge challenge in emerging markets, especially when targeting women as customers. So at BOP Inc., we believe that women micro-entrepreneurs can offer a direct and potentially effective channel for reaching women at the last mile. So these entrepreneurs can offer payments, credit, insurance, and cash in, cash out solutions and so on. So we're really excited to be at Sankalp because we want to share with you what we learned over the years in working with women micro-entrepreneurs who offer these financial services. So we'll take you through our big idea framework, which will help you to also drive the adoption of financial solutions at scale. But that's not all. In our interactive session, we also want to hear from you about how you make some of the key decisions around dealing with social norms, low digital literacy levels, household dynamics, and so on. So if you are passionate to explore how female micro-entrepreneurs are not just micro, but also very mighty, then please contact me directly. So I hope you have a great Sankalp and I look forward to seeing you at the summit.